Hey everyone, welcome to the Security Revenue Live show. My name is Taylor Wells. I'm your host, and I'm also the founder of the Cyber GTM Alliance. I got an exciting panel today, folks, of customer success leaders, and this is actually our first time we've done this topic on the show, and this area of GTM. So super excited for our panel. I think I was joking with our panelists earlier that when the chief customer officer became more popular in the past couple of years, I was like, oh, that's such a cool title because I just, with every GTM, professional should be focused on the customer, right? Like whether you're in partnerships, whether you're an SDR, whether you're a CRO or a marketing leader, or, and anything between, we should be obsessed with the customer and experience. And my friend David even has a chief experience officer, which is, we might get into that too, the differences and how he sees that today. But super cool. Let's jump right in. We got a full agenda here. Let's do some intros. So, Joy, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Yeah, my name is Joy Airing. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at AppDome, which is a mobile cybersecurity company.
Thanks, Joy. David, mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, so my name is David Terrazona. I was previously the EVP Chief Customer Experience Officer for a company called Lookout, mobile endpoint cloud security company. We sold our cloud security business to Fortran mid-May. So prior to Lookout, I had the pleasure to work with other iconic cybersecurity companies such as Blue Coat Systems, Netscope, Exabeam, leading and scaling their post-sales teams. And what was great about it is getting firsthand experience from the evolution of on-prem, lift and shift, pure SaaS and cloud native platforms. So I'm super happy to be here and sharing with the Cyber GTM Alliance community.
Thanks, David. Julie.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Julie Giannini, formerly Chief Customer Officer at Contrast Security, which is application detection and response. Prior to that, I was at Ignite for a number of years, also as a Chief Customer Officer. That's data collaboration with security and governance. And prior to that, Imperva. It's really fun to be here today.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Joy. Thanks, David. Awesome. And thanks, everyone, for joining us live. I see some more folks joining on in. If you have questions for us, please put them in the chat. We love answering questions. And so please put them in the chat. This also will be recorded too. So if you can't stay for the whole event, or if you want to share it with your team, we'll send out the recording afterwards, all that fun stuff. So let's jump right into the first question. And I'm going to start with Joy. So this question, Joy, I'd love to get your perspective on kind of the role of CS in GTM, and more specifically, like even in cyber, right? So how does customer success in cyber sit at the center of growth in your GTM motion? And really what I'm curious is, like, for cyber in particular, right? As you see cyber, and then also just customer success. Yeah. Any thoughts there, Joy?
For sure. Yeah. I think CS is really the connective tissue. That's the way I think about it for go to market. We sit at the center of everything. We are the representers of the customer within the organization. So translating things that we're hearing in the field to product capabilities and outcomes that just generally drive expansion. And I really see customer success as a growth function for the organization in terms of, again, our product and our roadmap, but also our revenue. So being able to share the insights that we're hearing and how they shape the future of the company. So my general philosophy is that sales opens the door and CS expands the room.
That's a great one. Yeah.
I'm going to write that one down. David, any thoughts on that?
No, that's a great question. I mean, I'm asked about it all the time, especially in the context of just high value, recurrent revenue businesses, especially in cybersecurity, which we all know thrives on, predictable growth. I mean, look, CS has been around for a while, and it's moving from being viewed as a cost center focused on just a general support to being actually the primary revenue engine for modern go-to-market functions. We're seeing it a lot in the market. An average of 40% of net new revenue comes from your existing customers, and in some cases even more. I know a company out there that generated over $100 million in net new revenue from their, and 99% of them from existing customers. So that's how important customer success functions are vital for company growth. At my prior companies, look, I've had a chance to, and Taylor, you and I spoke about this, I think, at a couple dinners ago, but I've reported to COOs, CEOs, and certainly CS was always, especially for SaaS businesses, is needs to be the center of growth and focus really on a couple of things, right? I think Joy touched on it a little bit too, but really, driving net revenue retention. I mean, we all know that this is the ultimate measurement for SaaS, especially in certainly in cyber, and the goals associated with them are very high bars. for sure. And, a lot of that is really, driven entirely by, customer success, activities, but also strong partnerships with sales, right? And you're focusing on really three specific areas around, NR. One is obviously the retention, right? Because CS owns the journey, driving the journey, ensuring customers are successfully onboarded, deployed, trained, they're adopting, they're seeing the value of the product, upsell, cross-sell opportunities. And, one thing that I think is not, that's overlooked or doesn't have a magnifying glass on, is like just real deep churn analysis, digging into that data, determine the reasons for churn, and then, figuring out what you need to go do to put a band-aid or fix those things long term. I think the other thing is really around, voice of customers. I mean, Joy talked about this too, just making sure that, one, you're exposing, real customer data and sentiment to cross-functional teams like product beyond what's in Jira or feature requests, but really informing the product team on the roadmap so they can hear the pain points from the customers, what needs to be met, how do we turn these rich feature into real outcomes for customers. And I think the last thing is really around customer advocacy, right? I mean, like, look, I just talked about some general stats around that, but successful CS function will transform those satisfied customers into very active advocates, which could be very, very positive. I mean, that's why we've had net promoter scores for a long time, but case studies and testimonies, referrals I believe they're all critical. And that, I think those things really put CS at the forefront in the midst of, obviously the go-to-market functions.
Thanks, David. Tons of impact there, both for Joy and David. But Julie, any thoughts that you'd like to add to that?
I would just add a bit in saying that, having been in customer success for going on 10 years now, we were always thought of as the post-sales team, kind of to Joy's point, sales would tee it up and then we were that other team. But I think as both Joy and David alluded to, in our journey in customer success, we are really the next sale team. We are teeing up that next sale. If everything we do is delivering value and showing what those outcome realizations are, that customer is getting ready not only to renew, but to do that next sale with us. So it's really critical that we have strong relationships, not only with our customers, but then internally across sales and product, as well as with the executive team, the board, and make sure that that message is getting widely distributed so that we can really expand and get that NRR up.
Super cool. Well, before we get the next kind of questions, we're going to get into some tactical examples. I'd love to hear from you all on specifics of, what initiatives you've done to drive this. But big picture, it sounds like what I'm hearing from you all is obviously moving from a cost center to a revenue center and a driver. And I know from my perspective, so my career started in sales and then moved to marketing in cyber. And as I saw our CAC industry-wide continue to go up every single year, I noticed this shift of, oh my goodness, okay, we actually have to get more out of our customers because there's no way this is sustainable for our cost of acquisition. And so from my perspective as a marketer, what does that mean? Well, it means obviously adoption and expansion and retention. But I know, Dave, you mentioned advocacy, and in cyber, it's like, oh my goodness, I haven't worked in any industry where the word of mouth and brand awareness and all these things are so crucial with a very justifiably skeptic audience that is based upon the needs of the customer advocacy. So customer advocacy is like really near and dear to my heart as like one of the most powerful drivers in cyber. Number one, to get new customers, but also it's like a table stakes to get any customers, right? Like to keep your customers, like you can't get new customers without social proof. And the best customers you're ever going to get is ones that are, word of mouth and referrals and stuff like that. So I think that how do we drive more, get more out of our customers in the sense, obviously give more to get more, but the concept of not always, focused on net new. As a marketer, as a seller, it was like, oh, we're so obsessed with getting net new logos, right? It's all about new logos, which is great. But like I mentioned, right, the CAC has only every industry, and especially cyber, has only gone up. Kind of had to think outside the box. And that's why I've really enjoyed working with customer success departments in my roles and in different organizations, because it's such an unlock for the top of funnel for sales and marketing to work with CS. So we'll get into that, but let's get into some specifics. I'd love to kind of learn a little bit more about different initiatives you've all, like specifics. Let's get a little tactical here, right? Something like give me a story or an example. And I'll start with you, Dave. Any one of them. You could talk about initiatives for adoption, retention, expansion, or advocacy But yeah, any specific initiatives where you're like, oh man, this was so, I wish I knew this 20 years ago when I started my career.
Yeah, yeah. It's a bit longer than that, but it's
Yeah,
like,
10
but no,
years, 10 years. I'll make it sound better. 5 years.
I think, I'll talk specifically about, obviously, kind of the gamut of the three, but then this is really about programs that, really support and really have a direct impact from the customer journey is the way that I see it, right? I mean, I think that the very first one, I think that considering that we're all in cybersecurity, I think that you guys are witnessing and seeing the pressures that these cybersecurity leaders are going through with the massive amounts of threats and the threat landscapes that are happening out there. On top of that, layering on the obviously the real hype of AI, right? I mean, the attack surface is being attacked pretty in a much more exponential manner. But, I think one of the programs is really just focusing on accelerating, time to value, right? I mean, I can tell you being in this space for a long time, I used to talk to CISOs. They used to tell me that, hey, look, we would put together our security goals and objectives every 6 to 9 months. So we're expecting to see value around that time. Since the change in the landscape, we're seeing that it's got to be between 90 and 120 days now. You got to build programs around, I would say, enablement, both internal and customers, really maximizing building playbooks for some of your common use cases, measuring the success. And certainly if you're able to do those things, you can start to drive successful outcomes with customers. So they're seeing value in a relatively short time frame. It's like giving them breadcrumbs and having them duck follow you along the way. And I think that that's been pretty successful in some of our programs with obviously retaining customers, driving loyalty, retention, just having much more predictability into our renewal cycle.
Dave, super cool. I love the time to value. I remember us at the San Mateo dinner. We were chatting about time to value, and I even wrote it down because I was like, "Oh wow, I didn't know this." From your perspective, the shift, and it totally makes sense, right? Not only LG product-led growth, but we're seeing as a society, we all want things faster, cheaper, easier.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amazon, for better or for worse on that. Look at Wiz, right? Wiz is a great example of that time to value. Like they somehow they figured out how to create a product that you could sell into enterprise, but also have a super fast time to value, which I'm still trying to figure out how they did that. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, Dave, I'd love to go a little bit deeper. Those breadcrumbs. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, is she for a really complex enterprise solution, or I haven't found any outside of the Wiz or a couple other exceptions. Usually, the time to value is not short. It's
Yeah.
usually long. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, no. So look, I'm a big data guy. I want to go back into the details, understand that that's why it says chief customer experience officer is getting into those details, understanding what are the obstacles, understanding some of the areas that you can optimize to reduce the overall, onboarding and deployment time for customers. But, I think that one thing that's been I would say, foundational and something that I've implemented in my last two companies is that, you know, customer experience is like the entire customer experience from pre to post sales. You need to make sure you understand that whole entire customer journey with, the customer's journey with your company. And so one of the things that we have done that's been wildly successful that kind of led to, accelerating time to value across the board was just, obviously partnership, obviously with the sales team, but getting engaged in the process. I would say about 70 to 75% deal closure gives the CS team the ability to do the meet and greets with all of the right stakeholders in the company. You get aligned early. You know what they bought. You know what their use case is. You can start to craft the customer's success plan earlier enough, and then you can build everything else around it to be able to make sure that you're executing on the customer's outcome. And I think that's very, very key because in our world of cybersecurity is that you have the CISOs that are actually the economic buyer, but then you have the operators that are actually operating the product, right? And in most cases, you won't see the CISO until probably the next QBR, whether that's quarterly or biannually. So getting ahead of that early, getting aligned on why they purchase, what their use cases, what problems we want to solve together, how it aligns to their overall goals and objectives for the years, and then crafting a plan to be able to help them get there is going to be key.
I love that. Before we get to Joy and Julie, I'm curious. I just want to make a comment that I love getting the CS involved earlier, mostly because handoffs are, not always great. And I think if I were to predict the future, especially in cyber, right, 10 years down the road and AI and all this stuff, I can see the writing on the wall where like full cycles AEs field CISOs, peer-to-peer selling, right? Building those long-term relationships. I don't know how CS plays into this, but either way, very transactional, assembly line, pass one person off to the next. I think back to your point, Dave, on experience, I've never found that a great experience, number one. And relationships are so powerful and only going to become more powerful with AI. So just an observation. I don't want to take up our whole time here, but Julie, any thoughts on kind of initiatives that you have implemented that, anything specific in those kind of four buckets that you were like, wow, this is something I wish I knew at the beginning of my career, or was a real unlock for you?
Well, something that really worked, and this was while I was Chief Customer Officer at Ignite. When I joined, we were largely data collaboration. So think Box, but for maybe mid-market, long tail. And part of the reason I was brought in from Imperva was we wanted to build out a security and governance, a security governance piece called Protect. So Protect with Connect became this platform. And that's where it started to get really interesting and exciting, especially for our enterprise customers, to say, how do we take our customers that are just on the Connect collaboration piece and upsell them essentially to the platform? And I wouldn't say it was as easy or quick as we would have perhaps liked, but if you get to those stakeholders, right, like whether it's the CIO at a big beverage company or the CIO at a large financial institution, they will absolutely, or the CISO as well, which usually had a seat right there with the CIO. They have a very strong interest in hearing about anything related to cybersecurity. And if you can really share how you can take what they already have, paint that vision of where we're going and show the outcome. And absolutely, time to value is critical. I mean, as Jeff Bezos correctly said, people are always going to want things cheaper and faster. So let's keep pushing on that. Then you have an opportunity to get a really meaningful upsell. And in a lot of cases, we were getting these 50% upsells that were just a lot of fun. It was kind of long and arduous, but the outcome was meaningful. And then, of course, yes, the handoffs have to play in. And usually the CS team is right there at the heartbeat of it because it's an existing customer. So they really understand what we're delivering.
Super cool. I love that. Thanks, Julie. It sounds like, it sounds like obviously product development or bringing in a product that people are really interested in, and expansion there. Super cool. Joy, any thoughts on specific initiatives that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think kind of playing off of what David and Julie have said, I think the thread, right, and a big responsibility across adoption, retention, expansion is really deeply understanding the customer and what time to value not only means for us. We have a definition of what that means, but they do as well. And so um, some of the things that we've done is, instead of customer success plans, you kind of I've done this in the past and do it now, revise them into a customer vision plan, and really try to approach it from what do we know and at what levels do we know. So that's, the day-to-day operators all the way up to the CISO. Our current product, we also interact with the CTO and with the development and engineering team. And so what is their vision? What is their vision that relates to our product and what we do for them, but what also is their vision outside of that. And so kind of just that reframing to really pull the thread of customer centricity through a lot of what we do. And then I think David mentioned this as well, like the education programs, and Julie mentioned this. I'm also very data driven. I think that's a key trait that you'll find in us customer success leaders or customer experience leaders, and really trying to continue on that customer centricity thread and the vision thread and the value thread to every program that we bring. So we have ongoing education programs that we bring to our customers, usually on a quarterly basis. And, the outcome that we like to see from those is sowing the seeds for future cross-sell, upsell, just general extension. But really, we want to bring value to our customers in a way that is backed by data and a way that is story-based. So I've done a lot of work on becoming just generally good storytellers. And Julie mentioned this the executive team is looking for nuggets and wisdom that they can bring, and sound bites they can bring from their meetings to the rest of their team, to the board meetings, to the things that help inform what they want to do for the future. And so a lot of our education programs are really centered around the things that are meaningful to them, but not leaving out the operating team who's actually using our product and more in the day to day. So those have been some really successful things that I've done over the years.
I love that, Joy. Super cool. I heard two things. I heard vision, which I love that. There's a coach out of Canada, David Sullivan, who's a really, really phenomenal just thought leader and very interesting guy or author. And he has this question he asked his clients, as they start to work together, their first meeting. He says, if we were to look down 3 years down the road, what would a successful relationship look like, us working together, right? What does that need to be? And he loves it because it's just such an open-ended question, right? That you get people to share things that are maybe outside of like that customer success type of question of like, what does it mean to be a successful customer, right? It seems so narrow, whereas vision is broader than that. And then storytelling, I love what you said about storytelling, because I even thought about this morning, that can't tell stories in the same way that humans, right? We can't, they don't have shared experiences with us, right? They don't have, they haven't experienced anything, so they don't have any stories to tell. They can tell other people's stories, but they can't tell the story that you've experienced. And I think that's really powerful, right? To people, to connect with people, to be like, hey, yeah, I was working with a customer 2 years ago that was exactly in your place. And this is what's happened over the last 2 years, right? This is the success we've had. And I've been able to work with this company. We've done these things. That personal story, not only telling stories is so powerful, but then also integrating your own personal experience into that story, I think is like a huge differentiator when you look at the robots taking over the world. But super cool. I love that. Let's switch a little bit over to, and I know we got some more folks that joined us live. Feel free to throw your questions in the chat. We'd love to answer them, anything, and we'd love to answer them. Let's talk about advocacy. So Dave, you mentioned this a little bit. A couple of folks mentioned this as well. I'm just curious, what tactics and tools have you used to transform satisfied customers into vocal champions? And like we mentioned, I think this is every early stage company I've worked with, especially in cyber, misses this, right? Like as you get larger, I think, you get a much more, you get customer marketing, you get customer advocacy, you get a well-defined customer success function. But especially early stage, for whatever reason, it's a huge miss. So I was curious, first, what tactics, what initiatives, and I'll start with you, Joe. Any thoughts there on the advocacy side?
Was that to me? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Joe. Yep, we'll start with you. That'd be great.
Okay. I mean, I think advocacy is huge, and I agree. It's oftentimes a little bit of a secondary thought in earlier companies, but I think advocacy with customers and with anyone really starts when the customer or the person feels seen and celebrated, and they feel championed within their organization and supported by us. So some of the things that we've done is just making sure that there's those continuous personal touches that we've done throughout the journey of the customer, and starting at the beginning. So not just waiting until they're fully implemented, not just waiting for the first NPS, survey to go out to them, but really making sure that we're checking in with all the stakeholders in a meaningful way and building those personal connections and really understanding, kind of going back to my last answer, like really understanding what does success look like to them. And then as we continue to build rapport and relationship, we can turn those kind of authentic moments that we've had into stories, into bigger things that help with peer advocacy, case studies, reference calls, review campaigns, all of that. In my mind, it really starts even before they become a customer, making sure that those threads continue to pull through, so that they can actually turn into customer references. And I think one last thing is, I think we often think, or salespeople think, that a customer advocacy is only a reference call or a big case study, but really it could just be small little nuggets, G2 reviews, a little sentence, a peer text. In cyber, there's so many peer Slack groups and WhatsApp groups. And so I think making sure that you're staying connected with all the channels that peer advocacy happens in is really important as well.
Julie, any thoughts from your perspective?
Well, I think it's important to note that in cyber, I think we have to be creative because many times customers don't want to reveal either the vendors they're using, the solutions, the issues they've had, right? There's a lot of privacy around that. So it's just important that we do get creative. As Joy was saying, there's a lot of channels and different reviews. I mean, I think it's all about quick wins, capturing that and being celebrated and championed. Everyone loves a chance, a seat at the table, a moment in the spotlight. So whether it's bringing up customers, at annual conferences or what have you, people love to share stories, but you do have to get creative in cyber.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, I look, Dave.
No, I agree. I agree with both Joy and Julie. You have to make your champion successful, right? I mean, and 9 times out of 10, they're told that they need to go use this tool, but they need to understand how to use those tools. You need to help them, whether it's really executing on the customer's success plan, or I like the vision plan that Joy was talking about, whether it's tightening up their security posture, blocking and preventing certain attacks from happening. But you need to go deep into the data. You need to understand, share the customer specific data during the business reviews and the cadence and check-in meetings to make sure that they're seeing that aha moment. They're getting the benefits of the platform, whether it's productivity, efficiency gain, protection, and continue to focus on the customer's outcome. Again, I can't stress enough, you have to make them successful. And they got to see the value. It's, these operators that we're working with. I mean, there's 3,500 cybersecurity companies out there. And on average, I thought it was like 20 to 30, security products in their stock. I heard the other day, another customer had 100. It's like, what? Hundreds products in the stack. And so they're already overwhelmed. And so, helping them with efficiency, protection is obviously key. And, presenting those during those, business reviews are also crucial, right? Because it shows the value. They validate it, they agree with it. And then, hopefully you leverage that for a case study or, be a reference to talk to a prospect or a customer.
I love it. Super cool. I'm curious, Julie, you brought up a great point, which is folks not wanting to, reveal their tech stack or provide any sort of public social proof. Any creative strategies you've all used to, I mean, obviously you can do anonymous and you can remove their name and you can, ways to anonymize the content. But I'm just curious, any cool things you've all done? I'll leave it open if anyone has any thoughts. It's all good if there's not. We can move on as well. But yeah, Julie, go ahead.
I mean, I worked for a SIM company not too long ago, and the purpose of the SIM is to be able to ingest from every single security product out there, so you can actually see which companies are using what, and you kind of look at you kind of put them on a heat map on what technologies that they're actually using to be able to provide security for mobile, for their cloud-based app, for their on-prem. It gives you like without asking them. I mean, that's the way that I've been able to determine like what customers are actually using. But I think it's still, you can still have those conversations as you engage with customers, as you start to build out their success or vision plans on what they want to be able to accomplish, what they're using today, what are some of the challenges, how do we work around those with your existing technology.
Very cool. Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Cool. Let's move on. We got about another 10 or so minutes left here. And once again, folks, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. Let's move on. I know we've kind of hit on this question already, but I'd love to talk more about kind of how to have a seat at the table. So I think a lot of times, I think customer success from my perspective has only gotten more, you may have a lot of different experience, but my perspective has only gotten more important over the past couple of years. But I'm just curious, any thoughts on how to make sure you all have a seat at the table and in the GTM function, right? Like this is a really important part and maybe one of the most important functions. And yeah, how do you all make sure that you have that seat at the table and work with your counterparts to show that we're a super valuable part of the function? And Joy, I'll start with you.
Yeah. I agree. I think customer success and just a shift in the overall buying landscape, particularly in North America, but globally, has really led to what David mentioned, significant customer-led growth. So I think that has just elevated customer organizations and any type of post-sales function significantly. But in I think this is maybe broad, but also something that I hold pretty near in my leadership, which is influence is really, earned through clarity and consistency. And I think those are things that customer success leaders actually really bring well. So showing up with a lot of data and a lot of revenue context, a lot of actionable insights. It's easy to show up with the qualitative because we do collect a lot of qualitative data in our conversations and customer feedback. But I think turning that into things that help inform and move the business forward is one of our strengths because we are the center of everything. Like we talked at the beginning, we're the center of the customer. So really, really making sure that there's a lot of transparency across the organization. And I was talking to someone about this the other day. Um, and I think one thing that's really important to me is sharing those insights and customer stories, not just with the leadership, but with the whole company and organization. So everyone feels like they are a part of the customer journey. We often forget that other departments like engineers, they're building our products and they want to know about the customer stories. They want to know what their technology they're building and the hours they're putting in, what it's doing and the good it's doing in the world, especially in cyber. So being really transparent and celebrating the things that we're hearing and the learnings that we have across the whole company, I think can really just elevate the entire customer organization as well.
I love that, Julie. That's super cool. I think, yeah, I noticed in from like the sale, like being an AE and in marketing and other sales and marketing functions. Sometimes we're actually really disconnected from the outcomes of our customers, and it can be. I know for me, it's actually reduced my overall work satisfaction because I'm not connected to actually helping people. My focus is leads, pipeline, and revenue. None of those are wrong, right? But it's not if it's not with the focus of helping people. I think we're missing out on not only work satisfaction, but people being bought in, right? So I really love you kind of connecting the impact that we're making on people's lives because I know for me, sometimes you're really disconnected and you get myopic, you get self-focused, right? Especially in more the top of the funnel GTM functions. And so I really, yeah, I know for my own satisfaction, getting, like, oh wow, that's really cool. A customer we brought on a couple of years ago, look how much success they've had. And that satisfaction is just huge, I think, just for people's even morale. And I love connecting from the engineer side. But I'll move over to Dave. Dave, any thoughts on getting influence across the life
Yeah.
cycle and getting a seat at the table?
Well, first of all, I think that foundationally, you have to have some maturity when it comes to fiscal planning and fiscal planning across all of your cross-functional business units, like planning together, making sure you understand what are the key initiatives, what are the measurements the KPIs and measurements you want to put in place. What are your goals, but most importantly, what are the key dependencies? And I think that understanding those key dependencies and exposing that, being transparent with the rest of the org will hopefully get you better aligned on what you want to do to execute on the company's plan. But look, I think it comes down to boiling down to two things. You need to, fiscal planning is obviously important, but building tight relationships with your counterparts, right? Because the customers is dealing with everyone in the company, right? Customer success is just at the forefront. And then also lead with data. I think we talk about data. It's becoming more and more easier to summarize, collect, through obviously AI. But when I think about the various teams, is like working with the executive team, making sure you have a seat at the table. You're thoughtful. You present on GRR, NRR. You do the churn analysis. Maybe you do a top customer review for the companies that represent 75 plus percent of your revenue. On the product side of the house, I mean, conduct those monthly product forums that's focused on product trends, feature requests. Embed the CS with PMs during those discovery calls. Sales and customer success need to be hand in glove, right? I can see CS folks reporting into sales. I can see it reporting to other functions as well, but you need to enable CS with the same implement as SCs. And again, I mentioned earlier about just, inserting CS earlier on the process, maybe 70, 75% deal closure. So you can reduce the friction around handoff or misconceptions of what the customer was being sold on. And then lastly, like I think as a customer facing executive, you got to be transparent, build your dashboards, socialize your customers' health, provide the broader teams the visibility of what's actually happening in the market and what you actually need from them to be able to help customers expand or even address a critical issue.
Love that. Julie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would just add that absolutely customer success has added this layer of analysis that I think a lot of organizations just didn't have before customer success became a real thing in the last, say, 10 years, right? So to bring that data, as Joy and David were saying, is critical for folks around the table to have those aha moments of like, wow, I had no idea that we were having churn because of XYZ, or here's some customer win stories or some turnaround stories. Those are very powerful. So that's sort of the bottoms up. But there's also a top down piece to this, which is it's really critical in organizations where CS really works. It comes from the top. The CEO on down has to be fully bought in that CS brings immense value. I mean, whether you look at Mark Benioff, where it sort of all started, back in sort of 2012 or a bit before, versus like the snowflake approach, where I think the Frank Slootman wrote a book about how, we don't really need it. It can be sales and engineering. I think at the end of the day, there just needs to be alignment across the executive team that there is support for this organization. And whether it's driven with, we could talk on another podcast about whether CS has metrics and revenue attainment, sort of like an account manager style. I think there's some movement towards that. Folks certainly today, they want to see a revenue impact, but it's critical that all the data is presented and it shows the arrows pointing to how there is greater retention and lower churn.
Love that. I love that. I love that top down, or having that leadership. And honestly, after this conversation, I'm curious, and maybe Julie, you answered my question, which is having that leadership from the CEO and et cetera. But it sounds like there's a lot of pressure on CS. Like, not only do you have to keep the customers happy, but you have to get them to expand. You got to get them to retain. You got to get them to advocate. You got to make sure you work with everyone. You're seeing market trends. So I'm just curious, is it, Julie, is it that where it's the CEO, you need that leadership, you need that investment, you need that momentum, and that's what's going to help CS survive? Because it sounds like CS is like, it's no small task, number one, and you're also the thread, and there's this pressure on expansion retention. So yeah, I was curious, any additional thoughts from the panel on, is it really you just need like, hey, we need somebody that's like, hey, we'll do whatever it takes to make the CS function successful because it is the lifeblood of our organization? Or is there other things that are really important? Just curious, because it's a lot. I mean, just my observations are like and a lot of potential too, a lot of opportunity, right? Like, hey, you guys need market trends, and there's all this stuff you can feed back into marketing and sales and partnerships. So yeah, any additional thoughts on that? Because it's as far as what you need to be successful in. Any additional thoughts from Dave or Joy, or even
No, it's super critical. I mean, like it's kind of funny. You have to be the biggest customer advocate. You have to come with data, like I mentioned earlier before, and got to be super duper transparent and don't sugarcoat things. When things are going right, highlight what's going right. But when things are going wrong, highlight what's going wrong and have a at-risk plan and make sure that people understand the key dependencies, because some of those things aren't addressable by the customer success function. But if they know the impact, they know the size of the customer, they know the impact to your existing customers, I think if you're leading with data, it'll take the emotions out of it. There's a great acronym. I don't know. I didn't coin this phrase, but I heard it from somewhere and I use it all the time. It's called DREAM. It's like data rules everything around me. And if you take that approach and you are advocating for what's actually going on with your customer and being transparent. And again, if you do have a supportive leadership team, that's why I think physical planning together is very, very important, because it's foundational. I think they'll get it.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome. Let's wrap it up with one last question. Just a light question to finish us off. Navigating tensions. Is there any stories, and I love a story or an example, obviously you don't have to share where you're working or anything, but just curious, how do you navigate tensions between sales and product? Obviously I heard data, I heard you need leadership, I need, connecting the dots, et cetera, but any additional thoughts? And I'll start with you, Joy. Any additional thoughts on navigating tensions with product and sales and all the other go-to-market functions?
Yeah. I think it's good to start with a reminder, or at least I always tell my leaders this and remind myself this, that conflict and tension usually means that everyone cares. Someone cares deeply about something, and that's how they're approaching it. And David just mentioned, bringing the data to remove some emotions, but conflict arises in that. So trying to remember that and then reframe around the shared goal. And I think you were just mentioning this about, customer success being an extremely important function. And we wear many hats in customer success. And so I think as companies continue to really lean lean into CS and lean into customer-led growth, there is that shared goal of making the customer successful because we're the foundation. So I think continuing to bring that back and reminding people and bringing everyone on board with the shared goals that you've set as a leadership team, that you've set and how you support each function, I think is super, super important. And I've been lucky to lead customer success at a few companies that are really big on goal setting and working as a team and winning as a team. So that's
I love
been
that.
a wonderful experience. There's always tension
Yeah.
somewhere.
Well, I love how you frame the tension means everyone cares. I think that's good marriage advice too, or good counseling advice to come in with that open mind, and very speaking thinking highly of the other individual. So I love that.
Mhm.
Dave,
No, that's
any additional thoughts?
no. Joy said it great, but there's a great quote that actually it was a marriage advice that was given to me because my family's from a martial arts background, and I think it's applicable in business. Right? Is that you need to know, how do you survive? Is you need to know when to attack or when to retreat.
Mm,
You know what I mean? But I think foundationally, I think that, you have to build those partnerships with those cross-functional teams and, understand what their priorities are, share the priorities, be transparent about the overall customer experience with the product, get deep into the data and, let data be the deciding factor, right? Because a lot of the data will tie to, customer outcomes, business and financial outcomes. And I think that's important that if you're able to articulate it in that way, that I think it could influence folks in your direction, hopefully.
Julie, any final
Yeah, I
thoughts?
would just add that, to stick with this analogy of teams, right? Sports teams. What is the goal of a sports team? Ideally, it's to win, right? And we absolutely want our customers to win. And that translates to a company win, which is why as teams we're on, similar incentive plans, right? This is why stock started being given out to all employees back, 20 years ago in the early .com, tech days, right? And so it's all around having shared common goals and values and then making sure we're executing on that. So foundationally, it's really important that sales, product, engineering, customer success, that we figure out how to get along and win together as a team. So breaking down any barriers and silos quickly and getting aligned is crucial. And I think once we're all clear on where we're going and how we're getting there, the success follows from that.
I love that.
And
Super
and just to
cool.
add to that, right? I mean,
Please.
last thing I'll say is that, I'm pretty intentional with my time because time is it's very limited, but I'll spend 30% of my time just with cross-functional teams and leaders, and then 30% with with my team, and then 30% with customers. Just kind of get a good cohesive engagement across the board, so you can synthesize and use those telemetry to really drive outcomes for your customers.
I love it. Super cool. We're up on time here. I heard leadership a lot. I heard, my immediate thought was like, could a customer success leader or chief customer officer own the entire go-to-market function and everyone report to you? I mean, if it's all about the customer, shouldn't everything align with that motion? I don't want to put any more on your all plate. It sounds like you got enough on your plate, but I do think there's something really powerful about that, like focusing on experience, focusing on the customer, and that all go-to-market functions should be pointed in that direction. And I think CS has an amazing perspective and amazing insights to provide the rest of the org. So first of all, thank you all for being on the panel. I know we're up on time here. Thanks everyone for joining us live. A really interesting conversation. I'd love to do another panel. And thank you again for you all for coming on. And thanks everyone for joining us. We'll catch you next time. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Take
Taylor.
care.
Bye.